A lot of agencies think they know who their ideal client is, but all they have is a vague category. I want to work with accounting firms. That is not an ideal client profile. That is a starting point. And if that's where you stop, you're going to run into the same problems over and over again. Bad leads, low response rates, and clients that either don't convert or don't stay with you for very long. So in this video, I'm going to show you step by step how to take a vague idea like accounting firms and turn it into a clearly defined ideal client profile, and then show you exactly where to go about finding those people. If you guys want more clients, more sales, and marketing that actually works, you should subscribe, because that's what all my videos are built to help you do. So it sounds silly, but the main problem with ICP development is that most people are skipping the actual thinking part. So they're defining their ICP very broadly, like I want to work with small accounting businesses because I'm new to marketing. That's literally all the thinking that they do. And then they go straight into hammering outreach, hammering ads, whatever they might be doing, cold calling a bunch of businesses locally. But the issue is that that level of definition is way too broad to be useful to you whatsoever. Because within, the world of accounting firms, you have solo CPAs, you have small local firms, you have mid-sized firms with teams, you have firms that specialize in different things, you have firms that are looking for growth versus firms that are just looking to be stable. And every single one of those delineations buys differently, has different major problems, and exists in different places on the internet. All right, now I'm going to take you step by step through defining the ICP. So the first step is going to be defining the business layer. And like we said before, we're going to start with the very basic, I want to target accounting firms, and we're going to turn it into something actually useful. So the first layer is the business itself. So not the person in the business who, let's say, you'd be talking to on the phone or talking to via email, but the company. What do they do? So what size is the company? What stage are they at? What kind of work is it that they do? So, instead of saying accounting firms, we refine it to something like accounting firms doing $500K to $2 million a year with 3 to 15 employees, primarily offering tax and bookkeeping services. So what have we done there? So we've eliminated solo operators and freelancers, because that's a completely different market. We've eliminated massive firms. Let's say we're a new business and we just don't have the skills or know how to work with them yet. We've also focused on firms that likely need growth but aren't fully built out yet. Maybe they don't have access to the tools that you have. They don't have access to the particular automation knowledge that you have, the particular ad skills that you have, whatever it might be. And now this is so important because your ICP is not just the person who can buy, it's who is most likely to buy from you, who is most likely to need your help, and who is actually most likely to respond to you. Next, we're going to define the person inside of the business. So businesses themselves don't make decisions, right? People do, the administration. So inside of the accounting firm, who is the person that we want to talk to? And of course, this is important not just for defining your ICP, but for your outreach. So who is the right person inside of the company to actually receive your cold emails, your cold calls, your DMs on LinkedIn and Instagram, whatever it might be. Now, a lot of people default to the owner or the CEO, but that's not always the best choice. I can't stress that enough. The owner might not be involved in any of the day-to-day marketing decisions, or they might delegate all of that stuff to somebody else. So in some cases, depending on what you're selling, the better contact could be an operations manager, a marketing coordinator, an office manager who handles vendor relationships. So even at the ICP stage, you're still asking other questions besides just who is the company. You're also asking who inside of this accounting firm feels the problem that my agency solves and has the authority or influence to act on it. For example, in a 10-person accounting firm, the owner might technically make the final decision on things, but the office manager is the one who's actually dealing with the scheduling issues, they're seeing the gaps in clientele week to week, and they're handling communication with marketing partners. And that means that the owner has the highest level of authority, but the office manager is the one who's problem aware. So they're going to be much more receptive when you offer solutions to them, while the owner might not really understand the importance of your marketing solution, right? So depending on your strategy, what you're selling, it might be better to direct your outreach to one or the other. So if we refine this, we might land on the owner or managing partner of a 3 to 15-person accounting firm. So now we then start to ask, what do these people care about? What is that role responsible for? And what problems are they personally feeling? So for this example, that might look like they're responsible for growth, but they don't consider themselves marketers. They don't have the know-how. They rely very heavily on referrals. they've plateaued in client acquisition and they want better clients, not just more of them. So now we're getting into real ICP development. Now we can talk about defining the problem and triggers. So many agencies can define the who, but not a lot of them can get to the when. So in our case, not every accounting firm is going to be a good lead for you all of the time. So we need to define when do these accounting firms become actively interested in solving a particular problem, whether that be Google Ads, web design, SEO, general lead generation, and those are going to be your trigger points. So for this niche, let's go over some examples. So seasonality will be your first one. So a lot of firms are not going to be very receptive during the tax season because they're going to be so busy, but reaching out to them before tax season to help them prepare might be a much better strategy. Of course, again, a lot of these are going to be dependent on what service that you offer. Now, second, you could infer that their revenue is down, for the past year or so. You could look at their reviews, fewer client wins or case studies posted on their social media, or just quieter social activity in general during months where it should be very high. You could also look, let's say you're offering Google Ads, you could also look and see if they are running ads, try to spot them by typing in some general queries on Google. You could also check if competitors are bidding on their brand name. Now, if you see them running their own ads, keep in mind it could be another agency running ads for them, but either way, that is a tell that they are looking into paid advertising. You could also look at what roles they're actively hiring for. So, are they posting job listings for accountants, bookkeepers, but there's no corresponding increase in, again, like we talked about before, that client-facing content, case studies, other growth signals. Again, also specifically for other services, let's say they're hiring for web designers or IT, and that relates to the service that you offer. Now, lastly, we could also look for some positioning issues. So let's say they're posting about, higher quality clients or some kind of niche strategy, but they haven't acted on those ideas. So, their service pages, their website copy, the information they're posting on social media, it doesn't really align with the things that, let's say, the owner and operators are talking about. So there's definitely some, issues going on internally. So now instead of I target accounting firms, we have I target accounting firm owners doing $500,000 to $2 million a year who have plateaued and need more consistent client acquisition via paid advertising. And lastly, we're going to talk about finding out where your ICP exists on the internet. So a lot of people jump to this question way too early, but you need to think about it like this. So where you find these accounting firms depends on how you defined them. So for this ICP, we can break it down like this. So these accounting firms mostly use LinkedIn, industry association websites, and local business networks. And they usually learn on accounting-specific newsletters, YouTube channels that are related to firm growth, and webinars and CPE trainings. And they usually show purchasing intent on Google searches like how to get more accountant clients, marketing for CPA firms, digital marketing for CPA firms, and software ecosystems, so different CRM tools and different management tools for accounting practices. So now instead of just saying, I'm going to use LinkedIn to find my clients, we're saying we should use LinkedIn because that's where managing partners in this niche actively network and consume business content. And now we can reverse engineer that content to target them. But now how do we find our ideal clients? So we can translate everything that we've already talked about into discovery. So this is where tools are going to be super important, but they depend on how we defined the ICP earlier. So for our specific accounting firm example, we might use LinkedIn Sales Navigator. We can filter that by industry, company size, and particular role. Similarly, you could use something like Apollo, a massive B2B lead database. You could also just use Google, and scrape and identify firms that way. You could also use some industry-specific directories, CPA associations or state boards. But you need to keep this in mind. Depending on who you specifically work with, you might have to use radically different tools. So if you're targeting e-commerce brands, you might want to use Shopify directories, Twitter, or a meta ad library. If you're targeting local services, you might want to use Google Maps, Yelp, local SEO tools. If you're working with agencies, you might want to be on LinkedIn, Twitter, or other niche communities. So the tools themselves are not universal, and you need to choose them after you've gone through the whole process to identify your ICP. Now, a lot of people struggle because they pick the tool first and they try to pretend like their ICP exists there when they probably don't. Now guys, this is a universal strategy. The process that we just went through works for literally anything, and you always go through it in this order. So define the business, define the person, define the problems and triggers, identify where they exist, and then choose the tools based on that, not the other way around. If you start with the tools and channels and outreach, you're going to skip the part that makes those things work. If this helped you guys, you should leave a like and subscribe and comment below if you want me to break down your specific niche.